Vabim vas, da pri pogovoru okrogle mize zares aktivno sodelujete, povsem enostavno. Visoko dvignite roko, prinesli vam bomo mikrofon in z veseljem prisluhnili vašemu vprašanju, predlogu, komentarju, skratka, čemorkoli. Današnji moderator okrogle mize bo strokovni urednik revije Monitor Pro in tudi član CIO odbora, gospod Vladimir Djurdjič. Prosim.
Dobar dan vsem, lep pozdrav. Danes bomo imeli to okroglo mizo v angleškem jeziku, zaradi tega, ker pač imamo različne predstavnike iz različnih držav in lepota tega je, da pač izmenjujemo mnenje, angleščina. So, welcome everybody. Guess what? We will talk about digital transformation, the topic that was not mentioned yet today. Let me do just a brief few words about this, what we want to inspire in this round table. There are so many approaches, so many challenges that lay ahead of digital transformation, and that it's very difficult to sort out the right path. So even if there is a desire in the companies, and the will even to do it, there are so many questions ahead that lay in front of the companies that are willing to do it. So today's panelists are either practicing this digital transformation or in various steps, or they consult and teach everybody else how to do it. So it's very valuable to learn from them what are the key ingredients for this. They might have different opinions, different approaches, but they have the expertise, so they are the experts in the field. So, and hopefully they might inspire some of you to go out and do your initiative for digital transformation too. Because digital transformation is not something that it's an option today. It's actually probably the new way of life and the best way to grow and adapt to the new situation. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Martin Stefan Thomas from Addiko Bank, who we just already heard today. Mr. Miha Kralj from Accenture. Then we have Mr. Marko Grobelnik, who is a digital messenger glasnik champion of Slovenia and also the researcher in the field of artificial intelligence in the Josef Stefan Institute. Then my pleasure is also to introduce Mr. Ludo Wijckmans from Microsoft Enterprise Partner Group. Mr. Matjaž Mušič, which is CDO from NLB, and Mr. Viktor Kovačević, Vice President and General Manager of Comtrade Digital Services. So welcome. And immediately let's go to the first question. There is a lot of research reports and experience which shows that innovation in the business brings the best return on investment. But in the most cases, we see that a lot of companies think or do these things in a way that it seems like it is a one-time activity. How should the companies approach this transformation from going from one-time activity or thinking in one-time activity approach to the, let's say, expected agile type of thinking and also then constant growth possibility? So, Mr. Thomas, if you can start maybe with your opinion regarding this.
Sure. As you said, it's a continuous journey. And digitalization, you could start and say, what's the definition? I would rather come from a concept of use cases. Yeah? And if you ask practitioners or experts in the field, it's very easy to come up with many industry-specific use cases. And some of the use cases will even as we have heard earlier on, transcend the boundaries of traditional industries. So, in the automotive sector, you could say it's no longer car manufacturers, but mobility providers, etc. And I think if you embrace that concept, the questions almost become obsolete, whether it's a one-time journey. And I think it's very important as a company that you keep to reinvent yourself by promoting new use cases. You need to be very quick if you want to lead in your industry or in the transformation, to explore new things and to learn very quickly. These are all concepts that are probably not part of the traditional DNA, especially of banks, where people always claim banking has been around for 500 years and you need to do money transfers. Yeah, that's all true, yeah. But there are different ways to do it in the most effective and efficient way today. I don't know, Matjaž, we share a common history.
It's a natural thing to ask the second opinion, yeah?
Yeah. I absolutely agree with what you say, Thomas. The problem, I will come from a practical point of view, right? I was appointed as a Chief Digital Officer almost 1.5 years ago. And basically, when you talk about use cases, it can be easily misled to the business case, to a way of thinking for the bank. So it must make money. This is the first thing that we are always thinking about when we're talking about financial industry. But the truth is that actually innovation comes out of the three topics, and this is one of the most important things for the financial industry. It's not just R&D department that goes and thinks about what needs to be done, what would be the best, and so on. The first thing what we have actually now trying to practitionalize in our bank is actually try to ask our own people, what do they think? They are constantly in making their business. They're constantly in contact with the customers. So they are the one that actually know what can happen and what can be beneficial for our bank and basic for our customers. And a lot of all these researchers are showing that 40% of the innovation is coming from the inside. One very important thing is also to actually look outside of the boundaries. And this is especially for a traditional industry like financial industry is very, very tough. Yeah? We are facing a new technology. We are facing with the regulatory easing. A lot of new companies like fintechs and so on are coming into the playground, and they're doing an amazing job, right? We were talking about now a new credit scoring models. Yeah? We are not talking about that we are assessing anymore just the financial data. We are assessing actually the behavioral. We're assessing what is going on the social platform, what is on the social profile, and we're trying to get and guess what is going to be a person look like in the future, right? So we are trying to open our doors, not just in terms that we are trying to search for new ideas, but also trying to embed this into our own activities. Just last weekend, we have actually had the first NLB Innovation Hub. We ask a lot of different practitioners actually to come to the bank and actually to try to establish a new use case. And we had quite a challenge there, whether this is a use case or a business case.
Thank you. So digital transformation obviously is not a one-time effort. And the question, if there would be a question, what comes after digital transformation? The answer is pretty simple, another digital transformation. So this is something constant. During the evolution, the company has to pass through the various cycles. Probably the first one is the ambition to do it, to design the thing, to execute, to expand then this vision to maybe other companies, other markets, and so on. And also then to do the revision. What is the best approach here? Carefully plan everything, or even here do the agile approach. So maybe skip something because there is some other business case that implies some not orthodox way of doing it. Miha, maybe if you can expand on this.
That's a good one. You can do that as a structured approach. It needs to come, you listened today about the session about the organizational culture. It has to come from the dissatisfaction from within. You have to be dissatisfied with the current status quo to actually drive the change. It's almost like the old rule used to be, you know, if it's not broken, why fix it? You have to switch that to the new rule that says, if it works, it's obsolete. So I'm looking, here is the challenge. I'm looking across this room of the CIOs of Slovenia. Do you have, each of you, your own digital boomlet, around 20 years old intern, that will tell you that your stuff sucks and that you have to listen to them every single day, ask carefully what's wrong, and is it really ripe and ready to change? You have to have people that will drive the change desire from within. Because if it doesn't come from within, guess where it comes from? It comes from the outside, and you will be standing on a digital burning platform, which is much tougher to survive from.
Mr. Kovačević, can you maybe do some comments on this?
So, greatly said. The thing that we also have to think about is culture. And especially in this region, culture of failure. So failure in our organization has to be a regular process. If you take a look, for example, leading companies in retail like Amazon, etc., or even recent case with WhatsApp application that was down for half of day, last week, I think, modern consumers are taking this as a normal, as a new normal. They don't think about this type of misfunctions as something that is terribly wrong with the products or services they are using. What they are buying there is agility of those services or products to adjust to the new needs, from the youngest population, but also oldest population as well. So that's my taking on this.
So if I understand, in our region should be, or in our, let's say, part of the world should be more accepted that it's okay to fail if it is during the process of getting something more innovative. Mr. Wijckmans, yes.
So if I may, and I agree, you know, there are different ways to approach it, right? A more structured approach, but also on the other hand, because it needs to come, and I agree, from the inside. Because in our economy, in our society, things are moving so fast and the cycles are becoming so short that you just can't wait before you have structured everything. Sometimes you need to take the risk and jump, or you succeed, or no, if you fail fast, but you've learned and you moved forward. And I think the way we have to look at it is that there's still too much resistance to change. And when you're afraid about the future, probably you value too much the current. Think about that. If you're afraid about the future, probably you value too much the current. And there's the risk, right? And there's one book, and some people in the room, I have recommended them the book, and I know they have read it, but there's one book that I really can recommend. It's Thomas Friedman's recent book. He's a New York Times journalist, and it's a book that it's called Thanks for Being Late. Every CIO, read the book, please, order it online, and then give it to your CXO. Ask them to read the book as well. Summer is coming up, so ideal time to read a book. It will change the conversation you will have with the CXOs that you're working on a daily basis, because it puts so clear in perspective on what's going on in this planet and which role that each of us can play. And don't look at it from the negative side. It's fantastic what's happening today. And I think from my experience, digital transformation, what's happening now with the enabling by all the technological revolution that's taking place, it's probably multiple times bigger than what started to happen in the beginning of the 80s with the introduction of the PC. If we look on what the PC has established over all those years, what we're facing now will probably in 5 to 10 years from now, and even moving forward, have much more impact on our economy and society than we expect. But again, you need to take it today, and you need to take it tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow.
Thanks. maybe I will go a little bit deeper in this cycle itself. I read recently Gartner research which stated that every company has to address 6 areas. So technology and business vision, then convergence of different technologies, analytics as a separate task with the emphasis on the proprietary algorithms. So algorithms probably will be something that will differentiate the companies. Bimodal execution, because not always you can do the new type of approach together with the ongoing operations. And last but not least, also organizational and cultural changes. And I'm connecting now this, something that was mentioned before in the presentations, that the cycle of acceptance in USA is 6 months. So quite a lot of things to do. What's the best approach? It is better to do all the things in the same fashion, address all the areas in the same fashion, do it in, let's say, some particular order, or make some emphasis on few areas and skip the others. So, Mr. Grobelnik, Mr. Wijckmans, if you can a little bit comment on this.
Yeah, this is a good question. So how to approach it? So I'm coming from research, right? So I'm more like on the other side, where innovation actually happens, right? And plus on the top we have this research spin-off, so where we try to deploy things, mostly to US because it's so much easier to sell there, the ideas. So even on the research side, you know, where we see where ideas are really being generated, right? We are often unsure whether we see that maybe something is good academic idea. We don't see right away if the idea will have impact or not. Sometimes it seems extremely cool, but nobody cares, right? Sometimes it's maybe something irrelevant, but then later on it seems like that actually it has impact. So in a way, we as academics, or more like this, computer science academics, we are running a portfolio of ideas usually. Yeah? And whenever we see an opportunity, and this opportunity could be on, typically in industry, especially in today's data economy, without industry we cannot do science. Basically, this changed a lot in the last, I would say, 15 years. Then this generates opportunity and development. So, I mean, I can tell for myself and for many of my colleagues, really. So we really depend on the opportunities from the industry. And this could be, so AI today without industry, basically it's impossible, unless you are in some small pocket of AI which doesn't need data, doesn't need CPU, and so on. So, for instance, just as a structural change, just going back to your first question, what changed in the last 2-3 years, right? Now computers see, now computers understand the text, now they can talk, right? They can do a couple of things which just 5 years ago it was basically impossible, right? So these are a couple of structural changes. Remember when GPS came in the 90s? So this was structural change. Today, just in the last 2-3 years, we have a couple of stronger structural changes compared to, let's say, GPS, right, back then. Plus cloud, plus a couple of other things. And the whole system started resonating, and this is the revolution which you mentioned before. So just going back to your question, so how to approach. So we make our living really from the companies or which are hiring us to do risk-taking with ideas. This is the whole thing, what we do. So we are called by, I don't know, Bloomberg, New York Times, a couple of other fintech companies, right? So can you do this risky thing so that they don't have internal failure? They define it as a prototype. So in principle, it could be defined as a failure. So far we succeeded pretty much with all of them, although sometimes we sign the contracts where we are not sure really if it's possible to accomplish them at the end. But so far works well, right? So yeah, quick answer is, on one side we are running portfolio of ideas, and then based on opportunities and individuals, champions on the other side, basically we try to push them into production. Yeah.
Maybe just one interesting point you have is the following. It's interesting, whenever we do this type of advance in technology, like with AI at the moment, how innovation is shifting as well. So we were talking before about business cases. Today, innovation in AI is not anymore in algorithms, in voice recognition, video recognition, pattern recognition. It's on appliances. How we really use all of this that already exists and apply it on some of our current business problems, or make some advance, taking some better features and beating competition on the global market. So this is, I think, is also one of the major topics we should discuss in wider spectrum here and around, how we can shift quicker this innovation research into the real appliances.
So you mentioned that in some cases you can jump very quickly in some innovative new idea and process and so on. But the reality in most of the companies is they have to measure the effects. And I'm thinking how you can actually measure the success of digital transformation. Do we need some new KPIs? Do we have to change also how we measure the things? Please.
Yeah, of course it depends on what the digital transformation is enabling or adding towards what the organization, the company is already doing. But for example, you start to see in Europe postal companies, for example, transforming pretty fast by applying models that are coming from industry, right? The Uberization of the last mile in the evening hours and in the weekend, not only anymore with the local postman, but by people that are available with a car to deliver packages towards customers that want to pay a little bit more because they want to have it outside of the traditional hours. Do you call that digital transformation? Yes, it is. But it's all enabled by a cloud type of based solution. How do you measure the impact? Satisfied customers, increase in revenue, increase in margin, increase in profitability. You know, these are the bottom KPIs you need to look at, because it needs to bring something to the organization, something to the company. So every day we start to see more and more of those examples popping up, enabled by technology, because that's the driver. And then you have the economic pressure, because if the postal company here is not looking into those type of scenarios, other ones will come. Other ones will come from other countries, and they will take the market. And then when you look at your old-fashioned KPIs, you will see that they will go down, right? Instead of investing in digital transformation scenarios on how to do better business, more business with more satisfied customers.
Can I ask Mr. Thomas, Mr. Mušič, because you're coming from difficult, let's say, industry for, as you said, for transformation projects. And it would be interesting to hear which kind of KPIs you are modeling to measure the success.
Yeah, let me first stress what you said, and I think it is an excellent question. You need new KPIs. Now, I would not say it too dogmatic, but I would refer to what Miha said early on today with regard to the level of maturity of industries. Yeah? And that makes a huge difference. If you're in a native digital industry, you probably do not need new KPIs. But if you're coming from a traditional industry like banking, you know, where we are kind of in the middle of the transformation, you need definitely new KPIs to lead a successful digital transformation. And before I give you an example on some KPIs, but before I do it, I would also like to stress that it's my deep belief that you need to set up a dedicated structure to drive the transformation, and that structure needs to be led by the board. Yeah? I mean, either you have a CDO, Chief Digital Officer, as NLB, or we as a smaller bank couldn't afford yet to have a Chief Digital Officer, so I double up as a Chief Digital Officer. I do it because I really like it, and I know that I need to drive it in the board, and there is full support for the people that we have set up. Just to give you And that is one KPI. So how much resources do you allocate? Because if a board just say, yeah, I want to be successful in a digital transformation, I would be very skeptical about that company. So we have, out of the now 3,000 people, we have about 200 in IT. And we have set up a dedicated unit, we call it the Digital Competence Center. It's 21 people. Yeah? And they drive the transformation with very specific use cases. And we basically built that unit from scratch. The unit has 2 employees who were part of the former organization and 19 new recruits. Because we felt the traditional organization simply doesn't have the experience, the drive, and the insights that you need to adopt modern approaches. And I was referring to like UX, UI designers. And when I started in the company almost 2 years ago, even all my board members were looking at me and saying, is he a bit crazy? Yeah? I said, no, it's a new profile, and we can, look in alternative recruiting, and we can look for that profile, and we will get candidates. Yeah? So one KPI is how much resources do you dedicate to that effort? Yeah? That's obviously only an input factor. You need output factors, and that relates me back to what Matjaž you made, and I think apparently not everyone got it. It's a difference between a use case and a business case. Yeah? And bankers particularly are very prone to say, well, let's see the business case. What is the profit impact? Yes, of course, unless you drive the profit, you will not be successful in the long run. But let's say we want to move people to use new payment services, peer-to-peer payment services, like we now started a pilot with Viber banking. Yeah? And if I would say to the guys developing it, well, show me how much money we make on peer-to-peer payments, yeah? And then we start building a business case and we enable that functionality, it would take more time for those guys to figure out a very shaky business case because no one knows. So what we do is say we reserve a certain budget for innovation, and here we are rather generous. I can tell you the figures. For us, it's roughly 4 million for the whole group that we invest per annum. And that 4 million is controlled very strictly, but it's not controlled by saying, you tell me how much profit impact you make. We say, okay, do we believe strategically peer-to-peer payments are important? And if we convince ourselves, and the business case is done by the board, we convince ourselves whether that makes sense. We don't need to occupy an army of people to figure out whether we, as a bank, think it makes sense in our business case. Then we say, okay, we invest a certain amount. So that's more driven by what is the minimum viable proposition we need to develop, what it roughly costs. And then we set very clear KPIs. In that case, it's how many transactions do we want to see? How many customers do we want to see who embrace that new technology? And how quickly do we want to learn? Because peer-to-peer, everyone says, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but actually in this region, there are only very few who have implemented it. So the difference between the use case and the business case is that in the use case, you define a specific KPI that you track in order to improve and learn, and also to abandon ideas. For us, for example, we aim for 20% of our ideas to be successful. So if we would do business cases, it would be a totally disproportionate amount we spend in doing this. In the end, you're absolutely right. You need always to think about what is revenue-generating ideas, what is cost-saving ideas. Because digital is not all about generating revenue growth. It's also about efficiency when it comes to the end-to-end processes, how you can take out costs. So it was a long answer.
Mr. Mušič, yes, if some comments?
Thank you. when we talked about digital transformation, yeah, we talked about when it can start or who will actually lead to it. In a banking as a very traditional industry, it's really hard to go it from bottom up, yeah, because everybody will say he's crazy. Yeah, this is first thing. In 1994, Bill Gates said banking is not necessary. Banking is necessary, banks are not. Yeah? And this is coming very true also today. Yeah? We are talking about a lot of new innovative things like blockchain. We saw the presentation. Yeah? We saw that these things are going to come, but yet we cannot estimate what is going to be the influence. A lot of industry, a lot of biggest banks are now investing into this technology, especially just trying to understand what is going to be the implications. We are not trying to be put in a position like it was in beginning of 2000 with the PayPal. Yeah? We completely, as the banks, missed the momentum, and the PayPal actually took over the e-commerce, and they are now the synonym of for the making the e-commerce. Yeah? Internet of Things. When I'm trying to talk about Internet of Things, they're looking at me like I'm a crazy guy, to be honest. Yeah? They're saying, do you think that a refrigerator will really book a dinner for you, and so on and so on? And when we are trying to show, we had just 2 weeks ago, a change management presentation, or let's say by Professor Vladimir, and he actually showed 5 biggest trends that was ordered by Mr. Obama when he left the office. And those things that he actually showed, it was quite similar to the presentation that Peter was actually showing. And these things are coming towards. So coming from bottom up, it's not very much a good idea. The management board has to have really the vision, also the means, and also the sense what is going to happen. Of course, we have to help them in addressing all these issues and actually addressing to them. And we have tackled this question last year very seriously. We have actually renewed our business and IT strategy. And the bottom point was, it's a survival strategy. We know what is happening. We know that if we are not going to change, we are going to be, I will not say dead in 5 to 10 years, but a lot of different business will be actually moved to another one. So first topic is, first KPI is, how much actually are you going to make out of the business in 5 to 10 years? In our case, it's that by 2020, we're going to have 50 to 60% of new business coming just out of the internet, coming out of mobile devices, coming out of currently 9 to 25%, it depends on the product and so on. It's really a lot of things that we actually have to do. And this is, let's say, a top strategic one. But then when we are talking about digitalization, we are a lot talking about customer experience. We are not talking about the customers. If we're not going to put really the KPIs that matter to customers, then we are again dead. We are just going to put a new technology, we're going to put a new automation into one. So thinking about how many stars do you want to have in iOS store or in Apple store, in Android store. This is really things that are mattering to our customers. They are not taking by the product itself. They're measuring by peer review. We were talking about peer-to-peer payments, but we can talk about peer reviews. We can talk about evaluating and so on. So these are the things that are really on transactional or bidirectional means that needs to be followed.
Okay. A question for Mr. Grobelnik, Mr. Kovačević. Let's explore a little bit the notion that the true, let's say, transformation cannot be done really outside the environment in which the company lives. So how it is intervened the, let's say, transformation inside the companies in comparison to, for example, the ecosystem where the company lives, maybe even the interaction and the regulation from the governments, from the countries itself, and so. Isn't there a limit, and how should also that area of, let's say, environment change in time to allow the companies to thrive in the future?
So if we start from the company perspective, we first have to have in mind that People innovate, not companies. So from that point of view, company's role is always to create platform for innovation, so inside out you can innovate with your own people. And of course with all aspects we mentioned before, like cultural changes, etc. Moving toward new digital age, it's all about, before we had this approach business to customer, where we always were focused more on the optimization, on the assembly lines, etc. Now we are shifting to the paradigm which is customer to business. So basically customers are those who are driving type of services and type of goods we are providing to them. So having that in mind, it's really important. Only one KPI, by the way, is important. To come back to this, is the speed. Only speed is important. Because if you are able to really start from the innovation, from the one single innovation to deliver it to real production in a matter of weeks or months, then you have that kind of speed. So then you can have this type of repetitive model in a way that you put many ideas in the culture we created in the company outside to the market. Once, when you come to that point, then of course ecosystems also recognize you as someone who can support them in their own path to the innovation. And that's the point where innovation comes to you as a part of overall process you change internally first. Because in the future, companies will not compete in a way, it will not be so important to fight against competition. Because innovation is, in a way, innovative ideas are a commodity. We all have ideas. We have ideas on many aspects of our lives. But who is really able to implement them so fast on the market they have, and at the same time create use cases so we attract another type of customers or population to acquire for the new goods we have in mind to create? That's the whole point.
So quality in this process is given.
And if I come back to the point of the countries and the policies and regulations we have to establish to support overall process, I have to say, and we discussed it before we started this round table, there will be only one market, global market, and we will all be exposed to the global market, either as a providers of goods and services, either as someone who uses customers or products or services. Why is this important? So in this digital age, then we all have to be first, not only US, but we all have to be first. That's why speed is so important. And countries itself, they are just competing on the global market as well as companies, in the services, in environments, in the culture, in education, and other things. So, of course, this is a neighbor for everything else.
Okay, Mr. Grobelnik, your point on this?
Yeah, you mentioned governments as well, right? So now, let's say if we try to put everything on this common denominator, right? Governments and big companies and mid companies and small companies, and innovation on the top. So obviously you need people, right? Innovation usually is connected with the people and with the will to change something, like you said before, right? So it needs to come from the inside. If it comes from the outside, it's usually too late already, right? Now, you mentioned governments. Governments have this one problem, you know. They have typically lots of money, they just don't pay people well. Yeah? And in this world, people go where they are paid better. It's very simple. Our government has this problem, other governments have this problem. They provide sort of safety, but not much more. And also innovation within governments, it's, now I'm speaking as this digital champion, right, meeting these people and trying to convince them, well, you should do that and that, but risk-taking is not really the first thing what they do, right? It's way safer to go with the flow. So if something is tested everywhere, so we can be the last ones, right?
Will this be the problem in the future, in a sense that the companies will just go away where somebody better understands or are willing to do the risk-taking?
Yeah, you mean for the governments? I think at the end really matters. I mean, well, IBM would certainly know how it's dealing with the governments much better. Depends on just few people which actually decide at the end. There's a whole structure below which is slow or faster, but generally there are few people which decide. And at the moment, seems like on our side, okay, because the government at least learned how to do ruling, right? So if next year this might change in Slovenia a lot. If there'll be reset again and everything's from the start. Okay, this is just my personal opinion about the government and innovation. Generally, just to complement pretty much what you said, pretty much agree with everything what you said. Within a company, there need to be a couple of champions, individuals which actually are hungry to make a change. And if these champions are not there, then nothing can happen really. And these champions are, well, doesn't need to be young people. Often they are younger, but they don't need to be young. And it's really, in a way, it's, you know, in AI or in other sciences, we have this type of adversarial games, right? You have two sides where are competing. And innovation versus non-innovation, this is basically it's adversarial game, and it's a social structure which evolves, right? And now, which one is winning at which time? They both need to coexist within a company, but the microstructure within a company actually decides which one is winning. So this is more like a scientific view how things happen. Yeah, so this is maybe
okay, thanks.
quick compliment.
So maybe to tie to the next question, also this topic. When we talk about digital transformation in the companies, obviously everybody is, I would say, fairly enthusiastic because everybody understands, at least as a notion, that this is something that has to be done. But behind the public, there is also some concern. There seems that there are some concerns regarding the changes in the employment and everything else. So people are afraid that actually their existing knowledge, know-how, jobs will be obsolete, but they don't realize that the new digital transformation will generate new ones. CDO a few years ago was not something that was ever even mentioned in the conferences. I would say something like Chief Artificial Intelligence Officers. I've maybe made up this term, but you know, something that is coming up. Actually, all the research shows that the demand for the people will be bigger. But how to do this kind of transformation? Mr. Wijckmans, Mr. Kralj, if you can share this one, because you are in the front from this, let's say, transformation, change, necessity in the big companies, in the big markets.
Yeah, so I think, you know, coming back to my expression earlier, you know, don't be afraid about the future, because then maybe you're too happy with the current today. You know, historically, transformations have shown to create more jobs than less jobs, right? If we're looking today how we are doing agriculture, that's completely different than we did it 100 years ago, right? Then we needed much more people. Today we need less people. There are still a lot of people working in the whole agriculture, food processing, and so on and so on. And as you said, it creates new jobs, right? It creates, you know, new opportunities. There's a worldwide shortage in data scientists. There are not enough specialists coming out of the universities today that can be applied. There's a higher demand than there is a supply. And these are just individual. I think the discussion is more about where digital transformation is going to have a huge impact, like robotics, for example, in production, where we're talking more about the, let's say, the more in manufacturing, the low-level jobs, where it could have an impact on 10,000 and 100,000 of people. But even there, you know, economies are changing and shifting. So again, I think it's something we don't have to be afraid of. We have to see more what is the opportunity in there for us as a company, as a society, as a country, and to make best out of it. Because it's going to happen anyway. And if you don't step up and take it seriously, then somebody else is going to do it, and then you're left behind.
Okay. Mr. Kralj, maybe a few experiences from what is happening actually in the United States, because I believe that in some of that big environments, that there are a few changes coming up that are maybe not so well visible here in these overseas countries?
Oh. Yeah, a couple of things to lay out here. First, Ludo, I do agree with you. There are new jobs coming with the whole digital wave. We are keeping the list of the jobs that most probably the future university should start thinking about. For example, for Disney, we created a full set of dream designers, literally people that will design your dreams in the future. And I'm not kidding. It's literally, they plan to have that within 5 to 10 years as a fully blown role out there. But let me start with the bad news first. Your organizations are going to shrink. So IT organizations are not growing. How do I know that? Because every sane CIO will not do the decision on layoffs on their own. You always call us, or KPMG, or EY, or any external consulting house. We do the dirty job. And in most of the organizations, when we are pushing them through the transformation, we do help them to shrink orgs, usually around 10%. There is around 5% of people that actually can't do the transition. They were great handling the hard drives, and they have no idea that hard drives are no longer relevant, and they don't see other jobs. Here's another even more interesting thing. People that stay in your organization, they're completely new profiles now. You have to force them to go from a deep specialists to actually turn out into a T-shaped personalities. T-shaped, like very broad literacy across the whole stack of everything, from business to technology, and then have that vertical of a deep specialization as well. They're valued way more. So even though you are shrinking your workforce for 10%, your total volume for the salaries is actually growing, which kind of makes the whole dichotomy of problems that, wait, I'll have less people, I pay them, why do I pay them more? Because they will go elsewhere if you don't pay them the market rate. So you are forced to go through internally through the vicious cycle of renewing your workforce, adding skills onto them that makes them more marketable, which means that you need to pay them more that they stay and make your business digitally better. And that's not easy. It's really hard, and that's lots of organizations are asking for internal help, external help, but it's very clear that that transitional workforce is forced to happen. I mean, Ludo and Microsoft is driving the whole set of digital transformation support services, which are awesome. Not that I would have anything to do with them, but they are really good in helping people to drive through that massive change, to go into a small, nimble, entrepreneurial type of teams that instead of having one leader that claims that I have the vision and I will push the vision down to everybody else, you need to have that ability to have a massive amount of small entrepreneurial teams, everyone with a small budding leader, with a small set of people, with a small budget, with a small idea, with a small approach. And then everybody tries to do their best. The whole structural, traditional approach of, the stuff rolls down the hill, except we don't call it stuff, that model is very much obsolete, and unless you change the whole organizational model and organizational culture and make entrepreneurial approach, you can't have 3 leaders on top with a massive vision and 500 PowerPoint slides that will tell this is where we are going to be. If the rest of the organization is not trying to find their way individually, you're kind of doomed. And so the culture actually happens on every single individual in your organizations. That was kind of a lecture, wasn't it?
Can I add to that? Because a lot of companies are good in planning the, let's say, activities. In particular, they invest a lot in the planning process of, let's say, digital transformation. But one thing is planning. Totally different type of approach is execution. And we were recently talking about some few facts. Maybe Mr. Kovačević and then Mr. Miha Kralj will tell us a little bit how interesting is that statistics in USA shows a little bit shift in who is doing the execution actually. Okay, let's hear it from here.
So if I can continue from your words, we live in a really complex world. So real power for organizations is simplicity. So if we talk about education and ability to change all ourselves as workforce, there is a simple rule that basically can be implemented in every single organization. We always have to exploit one skill and learn through others. Why is this important? And this is a very simple rule. You can ask every single employee in your organization, what is your core skill? What are the other skills you are learning today or in this period of time? Why is this important? Because of innovation. We are more free to innovate, to take challenges once when we have multiple cards to play. If I have multiple cards to play in my organization, I will take more risks within organization to make a change. That's why companies of the future will compete on the educational programs they can offer to their employees. And coming back to the point, and I will pass the word to you, Miha, again, related to the changes in US on that specific aspect, because we work a lot with numbers of US companies. Education for them becoming one of the most important topics. So what they are thinking as a society is how to really bring some of the jobs they went abroad back home. And the key point here is how they really can educate their people so they can work on some more cognitive jobs, on other types of high-level jobs they are not capable to provide at the moment to their own industry from the domestic market. So it's a huge issue in US, how to satisfy that huge demand from the industry, on the other side having regulatory policies from the new administrations that are quite opposite to that. And this maybe looks like sort of like mismatch, but it's not mismatch. Administration is challenging the industry to make this shift with these all opposite regulations they are putting into place. So they are taking this as a challenge, and from their perspective, I think this is a good move from themselves. That's why they think about themselves first. At the end of the day.
I think I know what you're asking me to say, because we had the discussion during the break. Let me first start from that side. Every domain or every industry goes through different phases. You start with the experiments and you go through the exploration, and eventually you end up in an exploitation phase, which kind of stabilizes itself, and you do the productive use out of that industry. And how do we see that in IT? That actually this is, at least in US, a very highly productive exploitation type of industry. Well, you will see the trend. Let me go across a couple of my clients. CIO in Disney is a woman. CIO in Intel, the new one that I work with now, is a woman. CIO in Qualcomm is a woman. My own chief executive officer in US is a woman. I'm having 60% of a female in my own team as a strategist. Overall, leadership in Accenture has more women than men. That is kind of a signal that this is extremely stable from a leadership perspective. IT in US is no longer explorational industry. It is stable exploitation, like all of the typical industries that have the same amount of females and males in the roles. So probably I don't have to point to ourselves that
we are already part of the problem.
Correct. You see where I'm getting into? We are too old, and we are too men, and we are too white.
Okay, it was interesting. I would like to offer the chance for the public to give the questions to this really knowledgeable guest here. So please speak up, ask the questions. Now is the chance to ask the questions regarding the future that is heading towards us, and we are heading towards it. Anybody? Oh, there is one. Can we have a mic there?
Hello, Boštjan Tavčar, Ministry of Defense, Administration for Civil Protection. I'm coming from telecommunications world. where the barriers is not just in my mind, but it's also in physics. And my question is, how important for you is that 5G telecom generation will be deployed as soon as possible? Thank you.
Anybody here who is particularly knowledgeable about this topic, 5G?
Yeah, before I came in this role, I was running for Microsoft the telco business in EMEA, so I still know a little bit of that. Yeah, 5G is super important, right? Because we have seen how that the technology inside the box. Everybody, I think, knows the law of Moore, doubling the capacity every 2 years for a lower price. We start to see that outside of the box as well. I mean, in the networks, in the communications, and so that becomes super important. And in the digital transformation, there are a lot of key elements in there, like cloud and connectivity. And 5G, of course, is a key pillar in the connectivity part. So from that perspective, and I get a sign that the time is up, just to finish up. So from that perspective, it's super important because it's an additional enabler to create new applications for all different kinds of industries, for consumers, and it's up to the ecosystem of governments, companies, consultants, technology manufacturers, service providers to grab the momentum and to use the additional 5G and what's coming after, because at one moment there will be a 6G and a 7G, but getting that higher bandwidth available to increase the quality and the speed of the communication is super important.
So very practically, it's actually picocells. 5G is a part of a standard of the picocells. I already see that what we are doing, for example, in Japan, which has a very far advancement in that area. The picocells and that super high bandwidth wireless transfer is actually bridging the digital divide. If you're looking today, you have kind of a world of massive back-end, high compute, high-speed networking, which is usually concentrated in data centers. And then you have a kind of a tier 2, which are our devices and cars and IoT and phones and desktops. It's not so much that compute power is not very strong on the edge. It's mostly that connectivity is trunked really well on a back-end in a data center. Picocells and 5G is actually bridging that gap. In Japan, there are already data centers that don't have a single fiber connection into a data center. That very much the whole data center is wirelessly connected over hundreds of 5G picocells out. And then you can have a car with the same level of connectivity. So very much bridging the tier 1 versus tier 2 compute and storage can be only done with an ultra-high bandwidth speed of wireless. And that's very much where 5G and Pico is coming in.
So we have to wrap up. It was a delight to host you here. Thank you very much for your opinion. And for you, I hope that this roundtable inspired you in at least one way, that you can go back home and return maybe the next year or in the next few years, although in digital transformation in 6 months will be cool enough, with your own, let's say, achievements. Okay? Thanks.
Hvala. Hvala moderatorju, gospodu Djurdjiču in seveda vsem našim panelistom. Hvala lepa. Verjamem torej, da bodo ostali z nami.